as a practice, it's a good idea. It's a great opportunity um, as a practice of stopping, because there are lots of times throughout the course of your life that you'll be very busy, and it doesn't matter what it is that you're doing. It doesn't matter whether you're cooking or working or playing, whatever. You just get very busy, and in those moments you're not very present. And a lot of times when you're very busy, you're not very mindful of really anything that's going on. You're separated. Your mind and body are separated. So stopping is a daily practice that everyone should practice, that everyone should explore. And it's actually a deep practice. It's very simple, but it's also very deep, as most simple things are. And the practice is to be able to stop and take 3 breaths. So if you realize you're not being mindful, you're not present, your mind and body are detached, you stop what you're doing, and you take a deep in breath and a deep out breath. And you might want to say something along the lines of, I'm aware of my in breath and I'm aware of my out breath. Now the practice is to be able to take 3 deep breaths, in breath, slow out breath, and to the point where all that is required for you to be back present from the busyness is that simple breath. To the point where you can do it three quick breaths, and you're back to perfect peace, perfect rest, perfect harmony between body and mind. Okay, that's the practice. At first, when you first start practicing, it might not be that quick. As a matter of fact, sometimes when stress is happening, or an anxious feeling, or anger, something along those lines that happens in the busyness, then it will feel like it's much more difficult to be present. But again, that's where the practice comes. So you practice and practice until it is that quick, till it is that easy. Okay, it's like doing push-ups. Yeah, if I were to ask you to do 100 push-ups without stopping, perfect form, could you do it? But if you practiced every day, eventually you'd be able to do it, right? And so in the same way, this breath, and eventually, at a certain point, it will bring your mind and body back to a place of harmony. And so let's just take 3. Let's stop after all the busyness. It's not supposed to be busy on silent retreat, but somehow the last 30 minutes got busy, huh? So let's just take 3 deep in breaths and 3 deep out breaths. Take a deep in breath. I'm aware of the in breath. And then release the out breath. I'm aware of the out breath. So saying, I'm aware of the breath, will help your mind let go of the other pictures that it's hanging on to, the concepts it's hanging on to. Okay? All right. Now we can begin. should take some time and meditate on interbeing. You should take time every week and meditate on this. Spend time with this. In the practice of communion, Jesus said, "Take, eat, this is my body, which was broken for you. Drink, this is my blood." This teaching where he was saying this is really a teaching of interdependence or interbeing. In other words, all things are connected. And when we begin to recognize how everything is connected, inseparably connected, then we will enjoy every bite, every time we eat a piece of bread or a bite of a banana. We're partaking, when we do it mindfully, we're partaking of the living Jesus, of the Christ. When you take a sip of drink mindfully, to do it mindfully is to do it worthy of the body and blood. And but this is really only possible when we recognize interbeing or interdependence, in that everything is connected. And so when you eat that banana, you're taking a bite of the sun, and you're eating the rain that falls from the sky, and you're eating of the earth. And if you really contemplate it deeply, you'll begin to discover that not only is that banana connected, but that your body is not independent. So there really is no independent self. It's an illusion. And the deeper you sink into this contemplation, this meditation, the more you will realize the true nature. The more you'll appreciate every step, every bite, every sip, every moment. And in that place, peace really does flood your heart. You'll find that it's difficult to be annoyed at someone because you'll be so full of the peace. So full of the realization of your oneness. And so little simple things that used to annoy you won't anymore. Little things that used to bother you won't anymore. You'll find that you're sinking deeper and deeper, transcending the concept of duality. Of independence. The idea of the self is just that, it's just an idea. So, spend some time tonight and tomorrow doing that. And really, you should spend time doing that each week. It's a good practice.
So I re-listened to yesterday's Satsang actually as I was falling asleep, which might be against the rules, but I did it anyway. And it actually didn't. It was weird because when I heard it live and in person, it sounded like I asked the question about black and white twice, and I was re-listening to it, and it no longer sounded as black and white. What you were saying, and kind of the observation of that is that what it felt like you were talking about was like maybe not pointed on your part, but like hitting something directly in the ego or whatever, so then it reacts in a manner that makes it seem like it's all or nothing basically, and not a fluid kind of. I don't know. I felt like that's just kind of my theory of it. Is like it feels like I was hearing it black and white because it was hitting something that didn't want to hear it necessarily.
Mm-hmm. Letting go of notions and concepts, ideas, is a difficult thing for the ego. But even belief is an idea. And so the mind, the ego has many, many different self-defense mechanisms, if you will. And so practicing deep listening, anytime you're going to listen, be aware of the breath while you're listening, and listen intently, listen deeply. The only way you can truly listen deeply is if you've let go of the judgments. And so that is a practice that is so important. If I'm going to listen to you, to really hear you, maybe you don't even know what you're asking, what you're saying, what you mean and what you're saying. But if I'm going to really hear you, I have to listen deeply, not with the self that has the judgments, that carries the judgments. If I come in with any preconceived notions or concepts of you, I won't be able to truly hear you. I will hear, but my ears will only hear through the filter of past judgment. I'll see you, but I won't really see you. It's like when so many came to see Christ, to see Jesus, and yet in seeing him they didn't really see him. Hearing they didn't really hear. Having eyes they did not see and ears they did not hear. Listening deeply is a practice we must learn. And really, it all begins again with you being present. What does this mean? You will never listen deeply to another as long as you believe that you are an independent self.
next question is related to interdependent self, kind of. I've noticed that, not even just at silent retreats, but like before classes when you do the breathing, like I could have tried to done breath work 20 minutes before that, and it could have gone smoothly, but chances are it probably didn't go as smooth as when like you would initiate it. I noticed that before classes happens a lot, or even like sitting down for satsangs. Here at the retreat, it's a similar phenomenon where maybe throughout the day I'm dabbling in and out of being present and reeling my mind in. Then I come to the satsang, and then it's like it doesn't feel as hard.
Is breathing hard?
No.
It is. You use the word phenomena, and oh my God, is it a phenomena? To think that breathing could be hard. Or flip it, to think that setting your mind on one thing could be hard. First thing, the breath work isn't work. So maybe we should, instead of calling it breath work, call it conscious breathing.
Okay.
Or if you're doing what you call it sitting meditation, since you're sitting and breathing. But it's not work. It's truly an effortless thing. It only feels like work to the mind because the mind's habit energy is to be everywhere but here, in the now. And so it feels like work to bring the mind into the now through the breath. Feels like work to the mind. Thoughts come, thoughts come, thoughts come. So when you're sitting down with someone, and it will help the mind become a little bit more focused, but most likely that's due to the feeling of this wanting to be seen, or wanting to be valued, or the self is involved in some way. I believe it was the Buddha said, when you look at a flower, you do not see a self. There is no self in the flower. But when you look at the flower, you can see the sun and the rain and the stars, the earth. But there is no self. Or look at all these trees around us. Same thing. They're not struggling to be. If you take that flower, you take those trees, and you were to take away the sun, do they exist? No. If you were to take away all that is in the tree or in that flower, take away the sun, take away the rain, take away the earth, it does not exist. It has no existence. And so the Buddha taught that if you to take all that away, he said that the flower, the properties of the flower are non-flower or non-self. And the same thing is true with your body and mind. Now, who you truly are, who we truly are, is that non-self that's filling that body and mind. That body and mind are interdependent upon everything. If you were to take away the sun, take away the rain, is there a body? No. The body does not live without the sun, does it? Cannot live without the rain. And so everything that is that body is non-self. It's non-body, non-mind. And what you're doing is you're learning to bring the mind and the body together so that it can be present in union and in peace with everything else that is in that body and mind. Because it's the idea of self or the belief of self that interferes or causes you to feel as if there's some separation between you and the tree, or you and the sun. That's just a belief. The mind can go on thinking of the non-existent future. And it's off in 10 years from now, dreaming and daydreaming, going off into all these things. And there's nothing wrong with this, but is it aware at all of the present moment? Is it aware at all of the breath? It's not even aware in that moment of what's fueling its ability to daydream. But if you were to take away the breath, could you daydream? That's why the breath is so important to mindfulness. Without the breath there is no mind, without the breath there is no body. It's not work. The practice of sitting meditation or of conscious breathing is not work. It's training of sorts, but it's not work. It's a practice, but it's not work. It's not meant to be laborsome. It's quite the opposite. The more you practice, the more not only effortless it becomes, but the more ecstatic it becomes. I was, I think 10 years ago, I would just, if I didn't feel present, if I didn't feel the ecstasy of being alive, I would stop everything. I was practicing these things that I'm teaching you now, then I would stop everything. And take a deep breath. And I would just feel the ecstasy of the moment flood back in. And I would feel all of my cells re-energized in the present. Re-energized by the breath, my mind and body being in the same place. I was alive again. We're only alive in the present. truly only alive in the present. So if you see it this way, you'll never see it as work again. It'll cease from being hard. When every breath is meant to bring an ecstasy or a high, well then, connect with it in that way. Touch the moment deeply in that way. That's what it means to be alive.
Does daydreaming fade away in all this? Because I kind of like daydreaming.
No, it doesn't have to. There's not, like I said, there's nothing wrong with daydreaming.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with, the more you awaken, the more you play. You can enjoy all those things. There can be a lot of creativity, a lot of beautiful things, but be present. If you're going to daydream, learn to be present in your daydreaming. This is something you've never done, probably.
Yeah.
Daydreaming for most people, again, we're talking about the person here, but daydreaming for most is the act of they're either bored or they're kind of in between sleep and awake, and the mind just starts to wander, just starts to create things, just starts to create a story. Right? And you awaken, sometimes you're like, oh, that's a great idea. Like, well, I'm going to do that. Like, sometimes it's telling a story. It's telling a self-fulfilling prophecy, if you will. Beautiful. Well, what does it look like to be present in your daydreaming? In other words, I'm going to be aware of the breath, and then I'm going to intentionally daydream. This is the same thing with preparing. Preparing something is part of creating. It's part of the playground. Well, we're preparing for a moment that's not real yet. If our mind gets lost in that thing that's not real, and I start projecting, then I'm setting myself up for disappointment. I'm setting myself up for some form of misery. But when you're intentionally in the moment, and in that moment, I'm preparing. I'm aware that this moment is a moment of preparation. I'm aware that this moment is a moment of creativity. I'm aware that this moment is a moment of daydreaming. And then it's beautiful, isn't it? And so this is where your conscious breathing or sitting meditation is going to come in. Until you truly learn and until the habit energy is conscious breathing, being present, the conscious breathing, then when you daydream, it'll be an accident, And when you prepare, you'll start to get lost in tomorrow. Your mind will start to wander off into tomorrow. And when you do that, you might start finding excitement there. You might find anxiety there. Then you bring it back to the moment, and you realize that in this moment, everything that you have need of, you already have, and there's no more anxiety. I was just preparing something, nothing to be anxious about. I was just daydreaming. No reason to get overexcited. Enjoy the dream. Does that make sense?
I mean, theoretically. I mean, it's not something I know how to do. But I mean, that's I guess the deeper part of the question is, like, I'm asking, like, well, how do you function in these things and be present when a daydream is your mind being not in the nature around us and going somewhere else or planning, like, it's just something I've never.
Let it be. Don't concern yourself with it. If your mind wanders off into a daydream, don't concern yourself with it. When you wake, then wake up with a smile. Be excited to be that you're back in the present. It's fine. As you practice the things that I've been giving you to practice, and that I will continue to give you to practice. This is an art form. You're learning. We've really, all this year I've been basic, since September, teaching some of the basics. Okay? This is an art form. Now, when you're practicing these things, the deeper the practice goes, the more it'll make sense how to do this thing. How to be intentional in the moment of daydreaming or of preparing. For most, they haven't learned yet what their mind's habit energy isn't present. And so as soon as a thought of non-present comes into their mind, they're lost in it. Whether that's a daydream, or whether that's preparing to fly to Europe, or if you go on vacation, or go to silent retreat, whatever it is. I'm preparing, what do I need? Now I'm getting busy, and I'm lost in it. Stress is coming up, anxiety is coming up, fears are coming up, worries are coming up, excitement's coming up. And then when it's all done, sit down and I've not been present at all. So you're learning to be present. So the breathing is so invaluable, so important, because you're learning an art form. And while it might not make sense, it's like in math. You are a lot. I don't know anything. I'm not in the mathematics. Okay, that's not my field of expertise. But if you were going to teach me,
So I'm a math nerd.
I know. If you were going to teach me calculus, where would we have to begin?
Derivative.
Okay. For me to learn derivative, where would I have to begin?
You'd have to know how to graph stuff.
Okay. So let's just say that I'm familiar with graphing. And you're sharing with me something about calculus. And I'm saying, well, how do I get there? And you would say, well, I'm teaching you right now. We're learning still the graphs, and then as the more that you practice this and learn this, then we'll step into this part. And as you're practicing this, then it'll make sense. But that's not going to make sense until I learn graphing all the way, right?
Yeah.
And I have to learn that in order to be able to understand derivatives, whatever that is. I don't know what it is. See, that's what I'm saying. My mind wouldn't be able to comprehend those things. Your mind doesn't have to be able to comprehend in this moment what it would look like to daydream intentionally, or what it really looks like to be fully present in the moment, and that moment is preparation or planning. It only has to know that it's possible. It only has to know that great bliss and pleasure is found there. And now we're go back to what we do understand, and we continue to practice that. Now, unlike math, math is like a science, right? Mindfulness is an art. It's not a science. Do this, and then you'll get to the here, and now you can get this step, and now you learn this step. It's an art. And so it's much more about practicing on repeat. In Kung Fu, they teach you, you learn the form. I don't know how many times I would just practice the form, and then my seafood would come over, elbow in, because everything's center line. Do 100 of those. And he'd come over, elbow in, keep your elbow in. He'd say, relax, get your feet out. No, you got to sit back, because in Kung Fu you sit back. Sit back, elbow in. And he'd have to remind me every single day of practice. He'd come over. Now, I knew in my mind to keep your elbow in. And when I practiced at home, because I went home and I practiced every day. And when I practiced the forms at home, I knew elbow in, stay back. But my habit energy wasn't elbow in, stay back. Those were foreign to me. And I would go, and I'd say, what are we going to work on today, Sifu? He said, work on the form that I've already taught you. 100. Do this 100 times. And the mind wants to go, I got to learn what's next. I want to move on. I want to move on to the next part of the form, because I was learning the forms. I want to go to the next part of the form. No. You have to do this correctly. We have to learn how to do this part of the art. This is part of the art before we can move on to the next. Right? And the same thing is here. This is why I've been saying to all those of you that are in the mentorship, you have to practice what I'm telling you in order for me to take you to the next step. And it's, I'm so thankful for being present, because if I wasn't, I'd be so frustrated. I'm for real, because I'm going, Because what's happened for a lot is people are coming for information, not to learn an art form. They're coming for information, not to discover the true self. So they think if I just show up to class for 2 hours, I'll eventually get that information that I've been looking for. And it's just not so. So we're here, we're learning. Practice, 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 practice your sitting meditation 2-3 times a day. Practice. Practice your walking meditation. Practice your conscious breathing. Practice stopping. Those are all things I've talked to you about on a base level, foundational level. You should be practicing those things every day. Whether you're on silent retreat or whether you're home, practice those things. Slow yourself. Walk mindfully. Do the dishes mindfully. Wake up, another thing that I've told you to practice, wake up with a smile. Greet the morning with a smile. Everything is new. And the more that this unfolds, your practice unfolds, then those other things will begin to become more clear, and they will make sense. It'll be more easy. But if sitting meditation is still difficult, then it'll probably be very difficult to consciously daydream or consciously plan or prepare for something.
So then in the meantime I should just plan like usual, daydream like usual?
Yeah, there's no problem with it.
Okay.
But just when you realize that you're doing it, the more that you practice conscious breathing, when you realize that you'll do it, you'll want to come back to the present. because it feels as if there's tension on it. Daydreaming still can be a lot of fun, but you can get done with some daydreams. So some daydreams are really good, some daydreams not so much. You know what I'm talking about? And you'll get done with your daydream, and you feel as if there's some weight or some fog, mental fog, or you feel a little weighted. Do you recognize this? That there are moments that you might wake up from the daydream and feel, oh, that's wonderful, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But then you could also wake up from the daydream with a weight or fog.
Yeah.
Okay, that's because it's happening in that place of non-present. Okay, so when you wake up from the daydream, just return to the present. No matter whether it was blissful, whether it was a nightmare, you return to the present. Whether it was a daydream or a day nightmare, just return to the present. Return to your conscious breathing. Take 3 deep breaths. I'm aware of the breath. I'm aware of my out breath. In, out. Okay? And in doing so, your mind and body will be in the same place again. Because your body was somewhere, but your mind was somewhere else. And you're uniting them. Embrace the daydream. Embrace those things. Treat it like a mother caring for a baby. You don't go, daydreamed again. Like a mother hears her baby crying. That damn kid keeps crying all the time. That's not it. Come on. A good mom goes to the baby and says, why are you crying? It's okay. And with understanding holds the child. Yeah. She doesn't beat the baby because it was crying. So, okay. You weren't present. It's all right. Greet it with compassion and understanding.
And we're basically just, one way to look at it is we're just reworking like the habit energy of the mind until it's present.
Mm-hmm. The habit energy has been so non-present that we're not even sensual creatures anymore. As a matter of fact, it's been so non-present for humanity that sensuality is gotten is a bad word for in a lot of religious systems and places. Sensuality is just really being in touch with your senses.
Yeah.
It's deeply touching those senses, and when you're present, when your mind and body are present, there's a present awareness. The senses explode in ecstasy and pleasure. The smells are noticed. Your ears are alive to the sounds of the moment. When your mind is wandering off, thinking about the non-existent tomorrow, you wouldn't hear the chirping of the bugs, the crickets. You wouldn't hear the rustling of the little squirrels, or we miss all that, or the water drops cascading from one leaf to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, until it hits the earth. You hear that? Yeah? When your mind is not present with the body, you don't hear that at all. So the senses become alive. And so that habit energy is, when you realize the joy in mindfulness, the joy in being present, it is something you will want to do, because it is going to heighten every experience you will ever have, including the daydreams. It will heighten making love. It will heighten simple touch. It will heighten the touch of your own skin. It will heighten every hug, every kiss, every bird singing, every song played. Visually speaking, the colors become more vibrant. The shapes become alive. So why do we want to practice mindfulness? If for nothing else, it's because you are alive in that moment, truly alive. And your mind and body are now sensually more alive than they've ever been. The one thing I would encourage you to not do is overthink mindfulness. So sometimes when you first start practicing, like you're counting, like if you're doing walking meditation, at some point the counting will cease and you'll truly be doing a walking meditation. The steps are in alignment with the breath, and you'll be able to really become aware sensually with your senses of the things that you're observing. But when you first start, you must become fully aware of the breath, and you must allow the steps to begin to come into alignment with the breath, right? So these are things that you're practicing, but then the more that you practice that and it becomes your habit energy, then you'll start to learn how to let it go. You can return to it if you want at any point. You know the form, you know how to do that, but you'll be able to let it go to begin to experience more of the creative side to mindfulness, the exploratory side to mindfulness. But for now, it's important that you maintain the form, that you maintain the practice, the foundational practices.
Okay.
And the foundational practices will never be something you abandon. Letting them go simply enables exploration, but you'll never abandon them. You'll return to them often, and in moments when your mind still might drift, and you'll return to it. Okay.
Right.
But don't think too hard. That's why sometimes the mantra is helpful, and even with sitting meditation, I am that I am, or I release peace. Your mind is then able to connect with the breath. Your body's connecting with the breath. You're present, but then your mind is also able to begin to be aware of something more that's taking place. I am peace. I release peace. On the in-breath, I am peace. On the out-breath, I release peace. Things like that help the mind initially. So, for sitting meditation, I always recommend you start with counting, and then maybe let that counting, after about 10-15 full breaths, let the counting become a mantra. And then after 10 or so breaths with the mantra, you can release the mantra, and you should be able to, at that point, just be in the breath, be fully present in the breath and the body. stillness will oftentimes then kind of come over you. And it's really beautiful because there's no more time. This is ekstasis. This is to be out of the mind. So there's really beautiful things. So very mindful and yet out of the mind.